The peaceful hum of Hope's horizon echoed through the vast halls of the ship as it glided silently through the starry expanse. The massive hospital vessel was a beacon of hope and compassion. Amidst the harshness of war, its mission, simple yet profound, to provide medical assistance and comfort to those affected by the constant conflict in the outer colonies. Its crew, made up of doctors, nurses, engineers, and support staff, went about their duties with quiet dedication. The soft clatter of medical tools and the rhythmic hum of life support systems formed a familiar backdrop to their lives. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge, looking out through the panoramic windows at the infinite blackness of space beyond. She felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on her shoulders, but there was a sense of peace here, a fleeting tranquility that came with knowing they were helping those who needed it most. The ship's path was uneventful. No enemy vessels, no pirates, no disturbances, just a steady journey through the stars. Yet despite the serenity of the moment, something felt off. Ilara's instincts were sharp, and she could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. She turned toward the communications officer, Lieutenant Callum Drax, who was monitoring the sensors. Drax's brow furrowed as he checked his screens. A subtle shift in his posture made Ilara's unease grow. "What is it, Callum?" He glanced over at her, his expression serious. "There's a fleet out there, Captain. About a dozen ships scattered near the outer rim. We're not picking up any standard communications, no identification signals, nothing." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Alien vessels. It wasn't uncommon to encounter unknown ships in these regions, but the lack of identification made her uneasy. "What kind of ships are they?" she asked. Drax's fingers flew across his console. "I can't tell yet. The ships are moving too fast, and their readings are not matching anything in our databases. They seem to be preparing something, though." She instinctively reached for the ship's controls, ready to order evasive maneuvers. The ship's advanced sensors couldn't be fooled for long, but whatever was out there was not revealing itself. Captain Voss paced across the bridge, every instinct telling her to take precaution, but Hope's Horizon was an unarmed hospital ship. It wasn't designed for combat, it was designed for healing. Her mind raced as she considered their options. Should they try to hail the unknown ships? Should they attempt to move around them, or perhaps continue on their course and hope for the best? But there was no time to make decisions. The first strike came without warning. A streak of light cut through the blackness of space and slammed into the hull of Hope's Horizon. The entire ship shuddered violently. Ilara gripped the edge of her command chair as alarms blared across the bridge. A surge of panic shot through her chest. A wave of confusion followed by the deafening sound of tearing metal and the thundering impact of multiple hits. "Their shields are down," Captain Drax shouted, but it was too late. The first round of blasts had breached their defenses, and the ship's hull was compromised. Pieces of the medical bays exploded, sending shrapnel and fire into the corridors. The crew scattered in chaos, unable to process what was happening. In the blink of an eye, their sanctuary had become a battlefield. Outside the ship, alien vessels swarmed around them like predators circling their prey. Their weapons continued to fire relentlessly, ripping through the outer structure of the hospital ship. The crew could only watch helplessly as the once peaceful mission turned into a nightmare. The chaos on Hope's Horizon escalated with every passing second as the ship shuddered from the impact of multiple blasts. The once sterile and calm hallways were now filled with the sharp smell of burning metal and the frantic sounds of alarms blaring over the intercom. Crew members scrambled to put out fires and secure the wounded, but the onslaught of energy blasts was relentless. The hospital ship's outer shell was no match for the advanced weaponry of the unknown fleet. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of her command chair as she fought to maintain control of the bridge. The damage reports came flooding in too fast to process. The forward section of the ship was breached, several medical bays were destroyed, and life support systems were failing in multiple sectors. She could hear the faint cries of injured patients over the comms as the medical team struggled to tend to them under fire. The bridge crew exchanged panicked glances, but there was no time for hesitation, no time for fear. They had to act. Ilara's mind raced through the impossible options before her. The ship was no longer capable of outrunning or evading the attackers. The hospital ship was not equipped for combat. It wasn't designed for warfare. It was meant to heal, not fight. She had to make a decision, and she had to make it fast. She turned to Drax, who was frantically typing commands into the console. His face was pale, his fingers moving with practiced speed, but there was a hint of desperation in his eyes. "We need to send out a distress signal to Earth," she ordered urgently. "Get the fleet to help us before it's too late." Drax nodded without hesitation, his voice steady but strained. "Yes, Captain, sending now, but we need more time. The alien ships are already moving into position to finish us off." The comms officer's fingers danced over the console, but his eyes kept darting to the view screen where the enemy ships were closing in on them, their weapons primed for another round of fire. Ilara turned to the tactical officer, Lieutenant Amara Kincaid, whose normally calm demeanor had cracked under the pressure of the situation. The crew wasn't trained for battle. This wasn't supposed to happen. Kincaid glanced at Ilara, her hands shaking slightly as she checked the ship's weapon systems. "Captain, we've got a few defensive drones, but they won't hold them off for long. The enemy is too powerful. Their shields are too strong." Ilara's heart pounded as she stared at the view screen. The alien ships, sleek and menacing, were converging on them from all directions. They were preparing for the killing blow when a second wave of blasts slammed into the ship's lower hull. The force sent everyone on the bridge stumbling. The lights flickered before plunging the room into darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie red glow across the bridge as the ship groaned under the strain. Ilara could feel the ship's power systems struggling to stay online. They were running out of time. They were running out of options. The seconds felt like hours, and then finally a crackling voice came through the static of the comms. Drax's voice, barely above a whisper. "Earth has received our distress signal, Captain. They're on their way, but it will take them time to reach us. We don't have long." Ilara's mind swirled with a sense of helplessness, but her training kicked in, and she steadied her breath. She could not let the fear take over. The crew needed her now more than ever. She glanced at the view screen again, seeing the alien ships draw closer as if savoring the moment of victory. They would not show mercy to a ship like Hope's Horizon. There would be no negotiation, no quarter given. Ilara took a deep breath and pressed the comms button, her voice steady and clear. "We fight until they arrive. Hold your ground," she said into the intercom to every corner of the ship. "We will survive this together." The bridge fell into a tense silence after Ilara's order as every crew member tried to process the terrifying reality unfolding before them. The ship was battered, the crew was unprepared, but the captain's words sparked a flicker of resolve within them. No one on this ship would go down without a fight despite the overwhelming odds. Hope's Horizon was not simply a hospital ship. It was a symbol of humanity's unwavering will to protect its own. Ilara turned back to Lieutenant Drax, whose hands were moving with urgency over the controls, his focus unshaken despite the chaos surrounding them. Earth had received the distress signal, but the fleet was still too far out. It would take them at least an hour to reach the sector, even at maximum speed. And that was time they didn't have. The enemy ships were circling them like vultures waiting for the final opportunity to strike. Drax's voice broke the silence. "Captain, I've sent the message, but there's nothing more I can do from here. The enemy is jamming all frequencies. We can't send out another signal, and our long-range sensors are barely functioning with the hull breaches. I'm not sure how much longer we can stay on course." Ilara's chest tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. "We need to hold on for as long as we can. Every second counts." She thought if they could survive just a little longer, maybe Earth's fleet could make it in time. Lieutenant Kincaid, the tactical officer, stepped forward, her usual cool composure replaced with a thin layer of desperation. "The drones we have won't be able to stop them, Captain, but I can try something unconventional. The alien ships are using similar weapons. We can predict their next strike based on the energy signatures, but I'll need to reroute power from non-essential systems to boost our shields." Ilara considered it for a moment, knowing they had few options left to it. "Kincaid, reroute the power. We'll do whatever we can to buy us time," she said. The tactical officer nodded quickly and began working with Drax to shift the ship's power systems. Across the ship in the medical bay, the crew was working just as desperately to save lives amid the fires and destruction. The medical officers and nurses had never imagined themselves fighting for survival in this way, but their training kicked in as well. They were helping the injured while trying to keep the chaos from overwhelming them. Each room was a scene of frantic activity as medical personnel moved swiftly between patients under fire, securing the wounded and stabilizing those who were barely hanging on. The ship's corridors were filled with the sounds of distant explosions and the thrum of the ship's failing engines as Hope's horizon lurched under the strain of each successive blast. The once orderly halls were now a maze of smoke-filled chambers and half-melted walls, yet there was no time to mourn the damage, no time to grieve the lives lost in the chaos. Every member of the crew fought in their own way for the same thing: to survive long enough for Earth's fleet to arrive. Back on the bridge, Ilara kept her gaze fixed on the viewscreen. As the alien ships loomed closer, their weapons primed once again, she could see their movements, their precision, their ruthless efficiency, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered if the aliens even saw them as anything more than a nuisance or a mere obstacle standing in the way of their goals. But she quickly shook that thought away. Hope's horizon was no mere obstacle, and humanity was not so easily defeated. The first of the alien ships moved into firing position, targeting their forward section. Ilara held her breath, waiting for the impact, but this time was different. As Kincaid and Drax worked feverishly to reroute power, they managed to amplify the ship's shield systems. At the last possible second, the blast hit the shields with a resounding impact, and for the first time since the attack began, the ship held its ground. The shields held steady for a brief moment of victory before the alien ships ready for their next strike. Captain Voss exhaled sharply, but her resolve only hardened. We're not giving up yet, she thought. We will not fall this easily. The alien ships, sensing the renewed strength of Hope's horizon's shields, hesitated for a moment. They adjusted their positions, clearly evaluating the unexpected resistance. For the briefest of moments, the crew aboard the hospital ship felt a sliver of hope. The shields had held, but the victory was temporary, and they knew it wouldn't last long. Ilara glanced at the tactical readout, which showed signs of energy depletion. It was clear they couldn't sustain this defense for much longer. Lieutenant Kincaid, her brow furrowed in concentration, monitored the status of the ship's power grid. Captain, we've rerouted as much as we can, but it's not enough. The shield systems are at their limit. If they hit us again with full force, we won't survive. Ilara clenched her jaw, her mind racing. The battle wasn't over yet, but the gap between life and death was growing smaller by the minute. Earth's fleet was still on its way, but there was no guarantee they would arrive in time to prevent the final blow. The silence in the bridge was suffocating, broken only by the steady beeping of alarms and the muffled groans of the ship as it endured another barrage. She turned to Drax, who had his eyes fixed on his console. The comms officer was doing everything he could to reach Earth's fleet, but the jamming signals from the alien ships were relentless. "Any luck, Drax?" Ilara asked, her voice tight with urgency. Drax shook his head, frustration evident in his posture. "They're still jamming us, Captain. I can't get through to Earth. I've tried every frequency." But he was cut off by another violent impact that rattled the bridge. The lights flickered, and the consoles sparked. Kincaid cursed under her breath, her fingers flying across the console, trying to stabilize the power. The ship is starting to lose its structural integrity in the lower levels. If this keeps up, we'll be crippled before Earth arrives. Ilara's mind raced. There had to be something they could do to buy more time, something the enemy hadn't anticipated. The alien ships were formidable, but they had one thing humanity could always rely on: resourcefulness. The crew of Hope's Horizon was not only fighting for survival, they were fighting for the very ideals that had driven them to the stars in the first place: mercy, hope, and the unyielding will to endure. "Focus on their communication systems," Ilara ordered suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. "If we can't fight them with weapons, we'll disable their ability to coordinate. If we can cripple their command network, we can disrupt their strike patterns." Kincaid raised an eyebrow, but she nodded. "That's a risky play, Captain. It'll take everything we have left." "We don't have a choice," Ilara replied firmly. "Do it. Drax, prepare the secondary communications array. We need to create a distraction." Drax gave a quick nod, his hands already moving with precision. "I'll set up the jamming signal now. It'll be a temporary window, but it might give us enough time to throw them off their rhythm. The plan was risky, but it was their only hope. Kincaid worked furiously, hacking into the alien ship's communication systems, trying to create interference. The tension in the air was thick, every second counting as Hope's horizon teetered on the edge of destruction. Meanwhile, the crew braced themselves for the next attack, knowing the ship couldn't take much more. Just as the alien ships lined up for their next strike, the bridge crew held their breath. The moment of truth had arrived. Would the disruption work, or would Earth's fleet arrive too late? Kincaid glanced at Ilara, her expression set with determination. "Now, Captain." At that moment, a wave of static flooded the comms. The enemy's communication channels sputtered and fizzled, throwing their forces into disarray. Ilara's heart raced as she saw the alien ships hesitate, their coordinated assault faltering. For the first time since the attack began, the invading forces were uncertain. They had lost their strategic advantage. The seconds stretched into eternity, but it was enough. "Now's our chance," Ilara shouted. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Full throttle." Hope's horizon lurched forward, its engines roaring to life as the ship accelerated, its hull creaking under the strain. The alien ships, caught off guard by the sudden shift, scrambled to regain their positions. The bridge crew watched as the gap between the two fleets widened, just long enough to give the hospital ship a fighting chance. The battle was far from over, but Earth's fleet was coming. And for the first time, Hope's horizon wasn't alone. The moment of disarray among the alien forces was fleeting but precious. Ilara watched with intense focus as the crew pushed Hope's horizon to its limits, the ship's engines roaring in protest under the strain of evasive maneuvers. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was a glimmer of hope. The alien ships, now caught off guard by the disruption in their communication, struggled to regain their previous coordinated assault. They fired off a few aimless shots, some missing the mark completely, others glancing off the reinforced shields that had been momentarily boosted. Ilara seized the opportunity. "Drax, keep the jamming going. We need them scrambling for as long as possible." Drax's hands flew across his console, sending more interference into the alien fleet's systems. On the view screen, the alien ships appeared disoriented, their movements less fluid, their weapons less precise. The distraction worked. Hope's horizon was no longer a sitting target, and the crew was buying themselves some much-needed breathing room. But the captain knew this would not last. The disruption was only temporary. She had to make the most of the time they had left before the enemy regained control. "Lieutenant Kincaid, what's the status on their shields?" Ilara asked. Kincaid worked quickly, her eyes darting across the data pouring in. "Their shields are still up, Captain, but they're weakening. They're trying to focus everything on us, but they're stretched thin. There are weak points in their formations. If we can exploit them, we might be able to take down a few ships." Ilara nodded, her mind already processing the tactical possibilities. "Get to work, Kincaid. If we can take down just one ship, it'll buy us more time." The tactical officer immediately began rerouting the remaining power to their offensive capabilities, focusing on the few weapon systems still operational. Ilara turned to Drax. "Keep our communications tight. We don't know how long the jamming will last, and we need to make sure Earth's fleet is getting closer." "We'll be ready, Captain," Drax replied without hesitation, his fingers continuing to fly across the console. As the minutes passed, Hope's horizon swerved and dipped, narrowly avoiding another round of incoming fire. Each shot that missed brought a small victory, but the ship was running on fumes. Ilara could see the strain in her crew's faces. Desperation was creeping in, but they fought it back, refusing to give in. They were still alive, still fighting. Kincaid, her eyes narrowing with fierce concentration, focused on the alien fleet's weakened point, an isolated vessel at the rear of the formation. It was smaller, slower, less heavily armored than the others, and it had no backup in sight. "Captain, I've got a lock on their rear shields. It's our best shot." Ilara didn't hesitate. Do it. Make it count. Kincaid issued the command, and the remaining weapon systems fired with all the power Hope's Horizon could muster. A series of rapid shots hit the alien ship, first skimming off its shields, then breaching the outer hull. The ship shuddered as the blasts tore through its defenses. For a moment, the enemy vessel seemed to hesitate. Then it began to spiral, its engines flickering as it struggled to maintain course. "We've got a breach, Captain," Kincaid confirmed. "Their shields are failing. The ship's losing power." Ilara's heart surged. "It's working. Keep pushing." But before the crew could breathe a sigh of relief, the larger alien ships turned their full attention to Hope's Horizon, their movements sharp and calculated. The disruption was over. The alien forces were regrouping, and they would strike again with everything they had. Just as the remaining alien ships closed in, a sudden, resounding hum filled the bridge. A bright light appeared on the horizon, growing stronger with each passing second. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "They're here," Drax whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. The Earth fleet had arrived. Massive warships, sleek and battle-hardened, emerged from the shadows of the distant stars. The long-awaited reinforcements had arrived, and with them came the full fury of Earth's military might. The alien ships, realizing they were no longer facing a lone target, hesitated, just long enough for the Earth fleet to unleash a devastating counterattack. The battle that had seemed lost just moments ago had turned on its head. Ilara stood tall, watching the reinforcements move into position, each one a testament to humanity's unyielding will to protect its own. The alien ships were no longer the hunters. Now, they were the prey. "Drax, open a comms channel to Earth's fleet. Let them know Hope's Horizon is still standing." Drax nodded, and within moments, the voice of Earth's Admiral came through, steady and authoritative. "Captain Voss, we've got you. Hold tight. We're here to finish this." The sight of Earth's war fleet emerging from hyperspace was nothing short of a miracle. Massive capital ships, their hulls bristling with weaponry, advanced fighter craft zooming in formation. Humanity's might was now on full display. The tension that had weighed heavily on the crew of Hope's Horizon began to lift as the sound of artillery fire filled the space outside, marking the beginning of a counteroffensive that would reshape the battle. Ilara stood rigid at the helm of the bridge, watching as Earth's fleet engaged the remaining alien ships with precision and fury. The alien forces, once confident in their strength, were now panicked, scattered. The sudden shift in power had them scrambling to regroup, but it was too late. Earth's fleet was a well-oiled machine, designed not only to protect, but to annihilate any force that dared to threaten humanity. "Drax, patch me through to the fleet's command," Ilara ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Drax worked quickly, fingers flying over the console, and within moments, the face of Earth's Admiral appeared on the screen. "Captain Voss, we've arrived." Admiral Thorne's voice rang through the comms, calm and authoritative. "We'll handle the rest. Your ship is safe now." Ilara allowed herself a brief sigh of relief, but she couldn't afford to let her guard down. The alien ships hadn't given up just yet. "Admiral, we're still operational, but we've taken severe damage. Our shields are failing, and we're down to minimal power. We'll need your help to finish this." Thorne's expression hardened. "Understood. We've got enough firepower here to turn the tide." "You did well, Captain. Now stand by for cleanup. We'll finish them." The comms went silent as Earth's fleet mobilized, the full force of its firepower targeting the nearest alien ships. Massive plasma bursts lit up the void as Earth's battleships unleashed devastating volleys, cracking open the hulls of the invaders. The alien ships, already battered and confused by Hope's Horizon's unexpected resistance, stood no chance against the onslaught. One by one, they were torn apart, their shields unable to withstand the concentrated might of Earth's military. Kincaid, her face alight with grim satisfaction, watched as the enemy's formation began to crumble. "We've got them on the ropes, Captain." Their remaining vessels are scattered and disorganized. Ilara's gaze never wavered from the view screen. Despite the shifting tides of battle, her thoughts were with her crew, with those still struggling in the medical bays. Every minute that passed was precious, and she couldn't allow herself to relax. Not yet. Keep your focus, Lieutenant. We're not done until every last enemy ship is either neutralized or retreating. As Earth's fleet pressed on, Ilara's mind raced, her eyes scanning the chaos unfolding outside. She couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the battle, at the coordination of the fleet. But more than that, she marveled at the resolve of her crew. No one had flinched, no one had given in to fear. Despite their lack of weaponry, despite being caught in the middle of an unprovoked assault, they had held the line. But the aliens were not giving up yet. One last ship, a massive, heavily armored battleship, broke from the rest of the formation, clearly intent on finishing the job. It surged forward, energy cannons primed, heading directly for Hope's horizon. The enemy leader seemed desperate to take out the hospital ship, perhaps to send a final message to humanity. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. The ship was coming right for them. "Captain, that ship's not slowing down," Kincaid said, her voice tight with urgency. "They're about to fire." Before Ilara could react, Earth's fleet swooped in, their warships surrounding the alien battleship, moving in perfect formation. Multiple shots rang out in rapid succession, each one striking the massive vessel's shield with precision. The alien ship tried to retaliate, but Earth's fighters swarmed it like a cloud of angry hornets. With one final, powerful shot from the lead battleship, the alien vessel exploded in a brilliant display of fiery debris. "Target neutralized, Captain," Kincaid said, her voice almost in disbelief. "It's over." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, but she allowed herself to relax for a moment. The alien threat had been decimated. Earth's fleet had done what seemed impossible in the face of overwhelming odds. But it was not just military might that had won the day. It was the sheer will of humanity, the refusal to back down, to allow the darkness of space to claim them without a fight. "Thank you, Admiral," Ilara said into the comms as she turned to the screen once more, where Admiral Thorne's face appeared. "You saved us." Thorne's expression softened, though his voice remained firm. "No, Captain. You saved yourselves. You fought back when others would have surrendered. That's what makes humanity strong." Ilara allowed herself a small, victorious smile. The battle was over, but the journey ahead was far from finished. Hope's horizon would continue its mission, because no matter the odds, humanity would always rise to meet the challenge. The aftermath of the battle left Hope's horizon surrounded by the wreckage of enemy ships, their hulks drifting in space like broken shells. Earth's fleet had secured the area, and the immediate threat was neutralized, but the reality of the battle still lingered in the air. On the bridge, Ilara felt the weight of the destruction pressing down on her. Thousands of lives lost in a conflict that hadn't been their own to begin with. The comms crackled to life as Admiral Thorne's voice came through again. "Captain Voss, we've got salvage crews heading to your location. We'll send teams to assist with the recovery and make sure the rest of your crew is secure. How's your medical status?" Ilara looked at the medical officer's report, her eyes scanning the numbers. "We've had significant casualties," she replied, her voice tight. "Many injuries, some critical. Several lives were lost, but the worst of the damage is contained. Our medical staff is doing what they can, but we need reinforcements." "You'll get them," Thorne assured her. "We're already in the process of organizing evac and medical relief for your crew. We'll get you back on your feet." Ilara felt a moment of relief, though it was tempered by the grief she carried. Her ship had survived, but it had come at a terrible cost. And while Earth's fleet had arrived in the nick of time, she knew that the psychological toll of the attack would linger long after the fires of battle had been extinguished. She had seen the faces of her crew: fear, determination, and finally, exhaustion. It would take time to recover from this. Kincaid approached her, her expression a mixture of relief and lingering concern. Captain, we've got damage reports flooding in from every sector. We're going to need to go into dry dock for extensive repairs. The engines are still functional, but not at full capacity. Ilara nodded, her eyes distant. We'll head to the nearest station. I'm not taking any chances with Hope's Horizon when we're still this vulnerable. Kincaid hesitated, her gaze flicking to the view screen where the alien wreckage still floated in space. What about the aliens, Captain? We've decimated their fleet, but what's stopping them from coming back with more reinforcements? Ilara let out a slow breath, her mind weighing the options. I don't know yet, Lieutenant. We'll need to analyze the debris and make sure we understand who we're really up against. But for now, we have to focus on our people. We've survived this far. We'll keep pushing forward. The silence that followed was heavy, as the crew on the bridge absorbed the reality of their survival. Ilara's thoughts turned to the patients still in the medical bays, many of them caught in the crossfire. There was no denying it. This had been a traumatic experience for everyone aboard Hope's Horizon. She had witnessed how quickly a peaceful mission could turn into a battle for survival, and it reminded her of the fragility of their existence in the vastness of space. She took a steadying breath before turning to Drax, who was monitoring communications. Drax, keep trying to establish contact with any remaining ships in the area. If there's anything we missed, we need to know. Aye, Captain. Drax replied, his voice focused as he worked. I'll keep monitoring all frequencies. Ilara glanced out at the stars through the view screen, the vast emptiness stretching before them. They were still in uncharted territory, still in danger, but for now, they had survived the worst of it. And survival, she knew, was the first step toward rebuilding. The recovery would be slow, but the crew had proven something that day. Humanity could fight, could survive, and could rise from even the darkest moments. And for as long as she drew breath, Ilara Voss would see to it that Hope's Horizon would continue its mission. Kincaid leaned in, her voice a low whisper. What now, Captain? Ilara's gaze hardened with resolve as she turned to face her. Now we rebuild, and we make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. In the distance, the Earth fleet stood watch, its power and presence a reminder that humanity was not alone, not ever again. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished, and Hope's Horizon would be ready. Days passed in a blur of recovery efforts, repairs, and endless medical work. Hope's Horizon drifted through space, escorted by Earth's fleet, toward a nearby station. The sight of the station's glowing lights in the distance brought a sense of peace, a stark contrast to the chaos and destruction they had just endured. Earth's warships stood sentinel around them, keeping watch for any further threats. But even as the immediate danger had passed, Ilara knew they couldn't afford to lower their guard. The unknown enemy still loomed, a dark shadow on the horizon. On the bridge, Ilara sat in her command chair, staring at the view screen, lost in thought. The crew was tired, physically and emotionally drained, but they had managed to hold things together through sheer willpower. She couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride for them. They had faced the impossible, and they had survived. But the weight of the lost lives still lingered heavily on her mind. She had promised herself that no one would be forgotten. Captain, we've reached the station. Kincaid's voice broke through her thoughts. The repair teams are standing by. Medical evac teams are already in position. We're ready for docking. Ilara nodded, pushing aside her personal grief. There was work to be done. Let's get us docked. I want the medical teams to prioritize the most critical cases. We need to stabilize them before we do anything else. Aye, Captain, Kincaid replied, her voice firm with determination. The ship's engines hummed softly as Hope's Horizon approached the station, its damaged hull groaning in protest at the strain of the journey. The repair crews would have their work cut out for them, but the crew had made it. They had made it through the worst, and now it was time to rebuild. The station loomed larger as they drew closer, its docking bays wide open, ready to receive the battered hospital ship. As they docked, Ilara stood from her chair, looking over her bridge crew. Their faces were weary, their bodies exhausted, but there was something else in their eyes: hope. They had faced annihilation, and yet they had come out the other side. They had defied death and survived. And in that survival, there was a bond that couldn't be broken. Ilara moved to the door, preparing to meet the station's medical and repair teams. But as she stepped into the hallway, Drax hurried to catch up with her. "Captain," he said, his voice low but urgent, "we've picked up something odd on the long-range scanners. It's faint, but it's a signal. Another fleet, maybe. It's hard to tell." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She had known the battle wasn't over. The universe was vast, and they had just made enemies. But she had hoped for a moment of peace, just a brief one, before the next storm arrived. "Drax, run a full diagnostic. I don't want any surprises." "I'm on it, Captain," Drax replied, his hands already moving across the console. His face was tight with concentration. Ilara gave him a firm nod before turning to face the rest of the crew. The journey wasn't over, but she had no intention of backing down. Not now, not ever. As Hope's horizon settled into the station's docking bay, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air. There was much to do: repairs, healing, and recovering from the trauma of the recent attack. But they had made it through. And in that survival, they had proven something to themselves and to the universe. Humanity was not so easily broken. But as Ilara watched the repair teams begin to assess the damage, a nagging thought stayed with her. The signal Drax had detected, the aliens they had fought, though decimated, were still out there. And if they had allies, humanity's struggle was far from over. She turned back to the station's bustling medical teams, the exhausted crew, and the remnants of their battered ship. The future was uncertain, but there was one thing she knew for certain. Hope's horizon would not be the last word in humanity's fight. Earth would rise to face whatever came next, and Ilara would be ready. The story of their survival had only just begun.